Hey, good evening. Welcome back to my little gardening show. We're out at the garden. Dad's with me.
Hi. Happy gardening.
And I've got all the kids with me too. We are going all in on this garden this year. Been out here almost every day. Taking a few days here and there.
Yeah. I'm back up one year.
Yeah, Dad's a backup. But let's see here. So we got one daughter. She is watering right now. She's having a good time. We just got done doing some maintenance, so most of the kids are playing over here. But we did some maintenance work. Actually, we're still doing a little bit of maintenance. And the thing we're doing right now is weeding. So we've gotten a few comments so far. People are just commenting on how clean the garden is. Mm-hmm. Why is it clean, you think?
Combination of really thick leaf mulch from last fall that was never worked down into the ground but allowed to remain on top, and then the way that you planted most of this stuff except for like the beans and peas maybe, where you drilled with an earth auger, drilled a hole down through the leaf mulch to the dirt, to the ground, and then planted. So all that moisture stayed in the ground, it's smothered the weeds. It's really, and it's becoming part of the soil over time too.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's good.
Yep, so that's some of the strategy is cover mulching really thick. So we got a double load of leaf mulch this year, which I owe Moorfield Township probably a bushel of tomatoes. But they were gracious enough, brought off 2 full loads. It took us a while to spread them, but we let that kind of bake down. And then, like Dad said, we tried not to disturb it a whole lot. Didn't do near as much tilling this year. We're using that drill planter instead, or the auger. So, I mean, we're drilling or using that kind of in place of the tilling to break open the spot for the plants, but not disturbing the soil around it as much, at least in most of these places. So consequently, you don't drudge all those weed seeds up to the surface. They stay underneath the heavy leaf mulch, and so they don't ever see the light of day. They don't germinate. Anything that does, that layer is so thick it dies out before really they could get to the surface. There are a few exceptions to that, such as a Canadian thistle. Be careful, child. The Canadian thistle we've had to dig out repeatedly several different times, and we haven't gotten all the rhizomes out yet because there's still little parts that spread. So really,
you have to get every bit of the root out is what they have to do.
So the strategy there is just consistent maintenance program. That's what it is. If you want a weed-free garden, you can use these strategies, but you're not going to keep it weed-free unless you do a little maintenance. And so the nights we come out here, we try to do a little maintenance, dig out stuff while it's small, and keep it well maintained. And as a result, we don't have near the weed pressure as we've had in previous years at this point in the year. Now the challenge will be as we progress through the season and this leaf mulch starts to be processed by the microorganisms, and the carbon is either sequestered in the soil or released into the air. You know, we're not going to have the advantage of that, and some of these weed seeds that are underneath will start to germinate and grow. I'll show you an example of that. So, you know, at face value it looks cool, but a closer look in the areas where the leaf mulch is already thinned out quite a bit because we've walked through here and whatnot, or maybe we just didn't get as thick of a layer because they dropped the double load right in here. So it's really thick in here, but maybe we didn't do as good a job getting it as thick over here. We already have little grass sprigs everywhere. And as long as it's not compacted, they pull out pretty good. You know, once they've got some size to them, it's easy just to pluck them out, and most of the root comes out. And you can just lay it on the surface, and then the sun will bake that. They'll wilt the next day, basically kill them. So it's again, it's just a campaign of consistent maintenance and having the right tools to maintain everything. Now the tools that we have, we've got several things at our disposal. So let me show you what we've got. So we've got the traditional garden hoe, and I really like this. This is a really old one. I think we got this at a garage sale or something, but it's got a real nice ash handle and a real nice blade that we've tried to sharpen. And we also bent this out a little bit so it's easier to work. But I like this tool for the Canadian thistle because one thing about the thistle, if you grab it with a glove, it just breaks off right away. So with this, you can kind of come on there and you know, chip and get a little more of that root out. And again, with the thistle, that's just going to be, we're going to keep battling that for the next month or so, maybe the entire season, and it will either go dormant, which my dad doubts and I kind of doubt that too, or we're going to exhaust the rhizomes there and it's eventually going to die out. But I like that. I like to take the side of that corner and just do a little chipping to chip stuff out. You can also scrape with this, you know, kind of one direction. Again, I don't, because we're in leaf mold or leaf mulch, the chipping is more effective than scuffing it out, right? And then these grasses here, you can just pluck that out, get the root. So one thing about weeding too is you don't have to do it all at once. You know, do what you have time to do. So, I mean, if you only got 10, 15 minutes here or an hour there, you know, whatever, depending on how big your space is. Got a little radish there, that tough, bud? You just do what you can do. And, but just be consistent. It's kind of like what we got a saying at work, you know, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So that's kind of what it is weeding the garden. You know, you just do it a bite at a time, a little here, a little there, you know, and probably the best way of maintaining a weed-free garden is just being consistent and having a routine, a little schedule. You know, just try to make it a habit and just spend a little time out here. So now another tool we've got at our disposal is called a stirrup hoe. At least that's what we call it. And it's like a stirrup, metal stirrup. It's a blade sharp on both sides, and the idea is that the dirt, you're getting underneath the surface and cutting the weeds at the root, and the dirt just flows through the hoop, and you can go frontwards and backwards with it. So the idea is you get, you know, on this stuff it's a little thinner, you can scuff that out. You can chip. I mean, it works better with two hands, but the idea is you can go back and forth, and it cuts the weeds away from the roots. And this is a good little maintenance hoe where if you come out and just do, you know, the first sign of the weed, you just scuff it out. Just kind of go along and do that. You can keep things weed free. And eventually that root is going to die because you're disrupting the life cycle, the growth cycle of that plant by cutting it away repeatedly. Eventually that root is going to exhaust out, and then you won't have to do that anymore. Again, that's why it's important, if you can try not to disturb the soil, you don't have to worry about those weed seeds coming to the surface where they're going to sprout on you. Everything's going to stay relatively weed free. Now there is one other tool I've got in the arsenal, and it's in the barn, but it's the Haas double wheel hoe. And I've got videos on that. But the idea there is you can put all kinds of implements on it, and then you can use your full force, body weight, and you're pushing this thing around along. And it's really good in kind of open settings like that, where like a scuff hoe, it's got scuff hoe attachments where, you know, instead of, you know, bending over and putting pressure on this tool and trying to scuff out, I can take that wheel hoe along and just chip, you know, and just wheel across an open surface and get a pretty good swath, you know, and cut underneath the surface, so I cut the plants away from the roots. And it works pretty well too on that. Probably my favorite tool is the two-way hoe, or the stirrup hoe, the scuff hoe. Once we get to the garden, you know, once you've got the weeds under control. So maybe you're starting out in gardening, you know, the best thing to do is to get a good cover mulch down and just cultivate the areas where you're wanting to grow the plants. You know, if you have to till, you till to get that started, but ultimately you try to get a thick cover on the ground, ideally at least 6 inches to start, and then it's just a daily maintenance program or a weekly maintenance program if you can't get out there every day, depending on your weed pressure. But you just take care of the little weeds as they come out, and it's eventually you've got everything under control, and you just have a lot less weeds. Each season that goes by, you have less and less weeds if you minimize disturbing the soil and you keep applying cover mulches year after year. I had a small kitchen garden in Indiana before we moved over. It was like probably a 15 by 20, something like that, and it was just awesome. We, you know, probably 5-6 years no-till, just cover mulch, kind of like how we're trying to do here, and had it to where hardly any weeds. And the weeds that would come in usually happen by like tracking them in, you know, where you mowed the grass or something and you got some weed seeds on your shoes, so you track it in the garden, or birds are pooping seeds, you know, into the garden, or, you know, maybe there's a seed that works its way to the upper layer and germinates. Either way, it was just really easy to maintain, very little weed pressure, and it's just a joy to be out there. It wasn't hard, you know. So as you can see, that's pretty much how we've got it now. It's not that hard. It's fun to be out here. I think Dad enjoys it. He's enjoying it. I enjoy it. We come out here and just everything is doing really well. It's just pleasant. I mean, it's a little more work just by virtue of the fact that this is so big. You know, being like close to a 50 by 100. You know, when we factor in the part my sister's got. But pretty easy to come in here and pluck things out. The other thing too is you don't have to water near as much, because the cover mulch helps retain the water in the soil. And ultimately, as the soil structure improves and the microbiology of the soil gets better and better, you know, as the soil food web is doing its thing, you have less pest pressure, because ultimately the crops have access to more minerals if the biology in the soil is right, which makes them just naturally stronger. And the plants actually from what I understand, the sugars they produce and stuff are more complex and not digestible to, or as easily digestible to the larvae of the different pests you might have. And so the crops are basically inedible for them, you know, and they don't attack them near as much. So just a ton of benefits. I'm still learning. I don't know it all. Obviously there's a lot other things we could be doing here that we're not doing yet, but so far this is looking like probably the best year in the 4 years that we've been out here doing this. It's definitely the cleanest, and I don't know, we're just off to a really good start. So anyway, hopefully you found all those tips helpful. Just encourage you guys, if you're not into gardening yet, anybody can do it. Just doing some basic things, and you can be successful at it. So I guess that's it for now. Until next time, happy gardening. Bye.